sharpen up a little bit. Newer research shows it actually helps your body release its own GLP-1. So, rather than paying hundreds of dollars for something you have to jab into your belly or your thigh, take a bacteria that's going to also help your body release GLP-1. Now, why could that be important? Okay, well, that might actually be helpful for weight loss or weight management, let's call it. It's probably a better goal to actually have. But GLP-1, and this is kind of emerging research, is not just for body mass, lowering body mass. GLP-1 is present, receptors present on every single blood vessel in your body, blood vessel cell. So 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels, 400 miles of which are in your brain, blood vessels, they all contain receptors for GLP-1. So now, if you think about, again, this theme that we've been talking about, gut-brain, longevity, health span, brain health, think about that. So Akkermansia not only helps your whole body improve its glucose metabolism, but also can help to trigger blood vessels to be healthier, potentially, in all throughout your body, including your brain, in terms of the circulation of your brain. The most jaw-dropping data on Akkermansia that I've seen doesn't have anything to do with metabolism. It has to do with immune system, and it has to do with response to cancer treatment. And in 2017, myself and a group of colleagues across Europe convened a meeting in France called Rethinking Cancer. And this was intended to bring world-leading cancer researchers to the table to talk about their work with one ground rule. And that ground rule is you cannot talk about chemotherapy or drugs. Okay. So what's in a cancer research conference where you can't talk about cancer drugs or cancer therapies, right? Well, you got to talk about stress, sleep, diet, exercise, social wellness, all the important things that cancer patients ask about, right? Well, the star presentation of that conference was a woman named Laurence Vogel in Paris, who was presenting work that she had done just then on 200 patients with different types of cancer, and they were receiving immunotherapy, which is not chemo. It actually activates your body's own natural immune cells to tackle cancer. And she was explaining her discovery that only about 20% of people respond positively, meaning they benefit from having their own immune system woken up. Well, that really sucks if you're a cancer patient to know that immune treatment that could be life-saving only works in 20%. So she set out to look at the differences between responders, where their immune system was woken up and supercharged and then goes after the cancer, whittles it down, in some cases to zero, stage 4 to stage 0. Okay. Quite amazing. Versus people whose immune system are like duds. They don't do very much to the cancer. What's the difference? So she looked at gender. She looked at age. She looked at comorbidity. She looked at medications. Nothing. She looked at genetics. Nothing. The only thing that she found that was the difference between responders and non-responders was in the gut bacteria. And it was one bacteria, and it was Akkermansia. The people who responded to immunotherapy to cancer, life-saving, were the people who had Akkermansia. The people who didn't respond were missing Akkermansia. So when I saw that, I'm sure people sitting next to me heard my jaw drop and hit the floor. Like, that was just such a bombshell to recognize this is another important dimension of our gut health. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have. It's not makes you a little bit healthier. It could be the difference between life and death, for a cancer patient. So for me, it sort of changed the way that I approach cancer as a disease, as a medical doctor, advising patients and, helping to guide patients. And so these are just examples of the profound discoveries that are being made with gut health, brain health, gut health, immune health. This is an area that if you want to have health span, like, you got to survive cancer. You got to dodge heart disease. You got to dodge dementia. You got to, dodge all these other conditions. How do you do that? And I think it starts with the gut. Your circulation, our circulation is vital because we have this 60,000 miles of channels, highways and byways, to bring oxygen and nutrients and blood cells, and any medications you take to every single cell in the body. And they also may be kind of a transit. They might actually be public transportation in our body for our healthy bacteria as well. All cancers, immunotherapy is something that every cancer patient should ask for, should have a conversation with their oncologist about. And the reason is this is the first time in history, modern history, where a cancer treatment has the potential of completely reversing your disease. And if you can reverse your disease, the impossible becomes possible. And I've seen it now time and time and time and again in people receiving immunotherapy. Of course, if you're going to get immunotherapy, you want it to work. And now we're beginning to realize that what is in your gut, like Akkermansia, can make that difference. So, for example, should someone we know be recommended to immunotherapy, they should also think very carefully about their gut health, because we know organisms, healthy bacteria like Akkermansia, can play a critical role. Akkermansia is not really present in food, so that's one of the reasons why taking it as a probiotic can be very helpful.
Beneficial, okay.
Beneficial, but foods that you eat can actually grow Akkermansia. So again, let's go into let's use the Amazon example again of digging in there, right? So here we have discovered this new bacteria. It's only about 30 years old or so that we've even recognized it. And we have to observe what it does. Just like any new animal you discover, in the Amazon jungle, what does it eat? Where does it live? What makes it thrive? And all that kind of stuff. Well, it turns out Akkermansia lives in the colon, the lower part of the large intestines. It tends to live in an area called the cecum. It's kind of like just the first part of your large intestines, coming out of the small intestines. It's this kind of sac. Most of the bacteria, healthy gut bacteria, live there. Incidentally, that same area, the cecum, is where the appendix lives. We used to think about the appendix as a vestigial organ. Get rid of it. No, it doesn't do any good. I don't know. Sometime when we were crawling out of the swamp as humans, like we developed a appendix, and do we need it anymore? We're rethinking that. We now are starting to believe that the appendix and the intestines and the cecum, which is located right where the gut bacteria are, which are so important for our health, might actually be a storage area for replenishing healthy gut bacteria, right? So it's really quite amazing to think about it. And also maybe an immune reservoir as well. Okay, so Akkermansia lives there, and what does it eat? Okay, it eats mucus that's normally found in our gut. So people might say, that sounds really disgusting, but actually our gut is filled with mucus naturally. We know this, like if you ever had diarrhea, like a lot of mucus comes out. But even for normal stool, your regular healthy mucus is part of our gut. Okay, just like, and it starts in our mouth, we have mucus. All throughout we've got mucus. Akkermansia is called Akkermansia muciniphila. It likes mucin. It eats mucus. It actually eats it all up. So the more mucus you have, the more Akkermansia you can grow because you got more food for it to eat. So how do you get mucin? All right.
Fiber?
Fiber is helpful, and Akkermansia will eat fiber. But it turns out that elagitannins, which are polyphenols found in certain foods, can help your gut secrete mucin, which then is the natural food for the Akkermansia. So you can actually grow more Akkermansia with food. You can't eat it. You can't eat Akkermansia from your food, but you can actually get it you can grow more of it, nurture it by putting more fertilizer, more food in for the Akkermansia. So the foods that actually grow Akkermansia, pomegranate and pomegranate juice, cranberries. I'd say dried cranberries, not cranberry juice, because cranberry juice is so sour that you would almost have to put a ton of sugar to make it palatable. Don't do that. Just have dried cranberries. It's a wonderful little snack to give you those polyphenols. Concord grape juice. If you ever had grape candies when you were a kid, that flavor of grape candy is exactly how real Concord grapes taste. That's the model and what they were. But other things as well. It turns out Chinese black vinegar. If you've ever had soup dumplings, they have a little canister of black vinegar next to it. You put it in your spoon to have the soup dumplings with. That grows akkermansia. Hot chili peppers, like dried chili flakes, actually also grow akkermansia as well. Peach juice has been shown to grow akkermansia. So again, this is another one of those areas of research where we're beginning to discover more and more foods that can actually help your body grow the akkermansia. Most of them actually work by helping your gut secrete more mucus that the akkermansia thrives on. So it's got food to eat. So more of it will actually grow there. I think it's important to recognize that those polyphenols that come in and the dietary fiber that come in the foods that are healthy for us, and it's called plant-based foods, they actually help us sustain our systems overall. Ketosis is sort of this reductionist way. Let's look at ketones. Let's focus on one thing. And it works. I mean, listen, it turns out that ketosis actually can be has been shown to be a powerful way clinically to intercept epilepsy in children. Yeah. It's also been surprisingly useful to intercept certain brain cancers, to change the speed of growth of brain cancers. So, there clearly has profound effects. The question is, and I think this is the one that really needs to be asked, anytime anybody thinks about any kind of diet that's kind of extreme, is it going to be good for you in the long run? It might be actually very useful for you in the short run. It's kind of like when you're trying to train for a marathon. You want to be disciplined, or an actor, training for a film role, or a model, needing to be prepared in a certain way. These are not necessarily healthy habits, or I would say in general, not healthy habits that you cannot sustain them for a long period of time. Here we are talking about living well and health span. You want to actually find that sweet spot where you get to do the things that you enjoy, where the things that you enjoy also do something good for your body and your brain, and allow you to take your entire journey in kind of like a satisfying way. The overwhelming evidence shows that to live a long and vibrant life, you have to have social connection. Surprisingly, this isn't about the food or the supplements or the injections, infusions, not even about exercise. And it's not necessarily about having a family necessarily either. It's really being surrounded by people and engaging with them. And I think that speaks to a dimension of humanity that we are able to confront now that we're going beyond the old argument of how many years you can begin to live. The other thing I want to bring up that I think would be interesting for your audience just to think about is that when you hear the word aging, you're thinking 50, 60, 70 and on and older, right? But actually we're aging the moment we're born. I mean, there are these milestones where aging, in fact, is something very exciting. You don't start losing muscle mass until you're about 40. You don't actually start changing your metabolism till you're actually 60 if you're otherwise healthy. You sort of don't really, your brain actually doesn't really change until you're in your 40s or 50s as well. So and I'm only bringing this up because we need to tease apart what society teaches us to think about aging versus what our biology tells us what to do or makes us feel. And this is where the mind and the body come together. And this is what I'm trying to say is that aging is the most natural process that we all experience from the time we're born to our very last breath. And so that it raises this whole issue, this whole idea of social connection is really, really more important than we thought. And if you wanted to start thinking about one thing that can help to bulletproof you against many of the declines that we experience in aging biologically, medically, clinically, the time to start thinking about finessing your friend group and your social group and your family connections is probably like when you're 40. Well, the other thing about how our metabolism changes is, these amazing realizations that the hardwiring in our body of how our body uses energy and generates energy, which on one hand is glucose metabolism, storage of our energy, then burning of our energy. That's what I meant by sort of your body doesn't actually change that many times in our lives. Like when you're born, your metabolism is set at 0. In the first year, it goes sky high, about 50% higher but when you're 1 year old than when you're in your 20s. And then it comes down between 1 year old and 20-year old. It actually declines to cruising altitude. So you overshoot in the beginning, and then you hit your 20s, and it actually is designed to stay stable throughout your adult life from 20 to 60. And then only after 60, it declines a little bit, about 17% until you're about 90. 4 phases of human metabolism. Now, we of course know that everyone, when they hit their 40s and 50s, things do happen to their body. Their bones do get sent, their hormones change, their weight does change. So what actually is happening? Well, I can tell you it's not the biology that's changing. It's that other forces surrounding us are putting pressure in our biology so that it's harder to hold up the lift of the metabolism that we're supposed to have, that we should be able to have. And this is an important point in terms of healthy aging and health span, which is that the things that, you can't change your hormones that much as women who are going through menopause, but you can actually counter in other ways with stress mitigation, with exercise, with diet. All of those things matter, and managing any chronic diseases. Now, a super interesting area that I've been looking at recently is the impact of the vagus nerve. Okay, so I'll give you like a very personal view of the vagus nerve.
Okay.
All right, not my vagus nerve, but when I was a medical student, I was dissecting. You're in the anatomy lab in your first year, okay, and you can track this gigantic nerve coming from underneath the skull down through the neck into the chest cavity. But now we know something really remarkable about this nerve that runs from the brain down to the gut. And that is that 80 to 90% of the signals actually don't go from the brain to the gut. They run upwards. It is really the telecommunication system from our whole body, especially our gut, up to the brain. And so let's talk about aging. And like one of the most prized human qualities of being vibrant and thriving, and what most people I think would say is a non-negotiable when it comes to having good health span, is having brain health, good cognition, right? Like, okay, where did I leave my keys? That's okay, but you can't recognize people, you can't communicate well. I think those are the things that people fear the most. Well, here is a new science that shows that whatever's happening in our gut, which is another area to talk about with healthy aging, is being communicated upstairs to our brain. And so this idea of gut microbiome, gut health, is not just for people who are in the middle of their lives worrying about irritable bowel, but actually it's something that older people, as we go through our decades, really need to be thinking about. Having good brain health starts in the gut. We count on doctors to be up on things, and I can tell you that we were taught certain things to believe as truth. And the nature of science is that things change as we learn more. And what we're learning more about the human body, just when we thought we knew pretty much everything there was to know about the body, we're discovering new nerve cells in the brain, new types of heart tissue, new kinds of stem cells. I mean, it's really mind-boggling what we're learning about the body. I will tell you again, when I was in medical school, I had to, in the first year, memorize bacteria, and along with the mantra that came along with memorizing bacteria was must kill bacteria. Then you had to memorize antibiotics, must use prescribed drugs to kill bacteria, because bacteria are bad and they cause disease. Well, actually, as it turns out, most of the bacteria that we meet in our lives are not bad bacteria. Occasionally we meet some bad guys. Most of the time we are surrounded by, and we are inhabited by, beneficial bacteria that are good for us. We're surrounded by good guys, and occasionally have a bad guy that needs to be, put to rest. Now, we were also told in medical school that certain parts of the brain were sterile, guaranteed sterile. For example, mother's milk, completely sterile. There's no bacteria in mother's milk because, well, Mother Nature said you can't infect the baby, so it's sterile. Totally wrong. The mother's milk, the first suckle, is filled with not only nutrients that we didn't appreciate before, but also bacteria that populate the baby's gut. So mom transfers healthy bacteria into the baby just with the first suckle, number one. Number two, we were told that urine was also sterile. And if you had bacteria in your urine, you had a bladder infection. That's still kind of the wisdom, that prevailing wisdom that's out there. But actually the bladder has its own microbiome. Okay. And it's healthy bacteria. So when you have a bladder infection, it's a dysbiosis. It's a disturbance of what's natural. Other sterile parts of the body, human semen was always thought to be sterile. It doesn't have bacteria. You can't have testicles loaded with bacteria. Wrong. We do actually have normal, healthy bacteria that live in the testicles as well. Interesting, right? So let's go to the brain. Of all the places that you do not want to have an infection, it's your brain, right? Meningitis is the lining of the brain getting infected. You have like a brain infection. When I was training to be a doctor, was, synonymous with a life-threatening infection that you might not be able to cure, all right, with whatever antibiotics. Well, it turns out now, because we're looking for healthy bacteria, the brain has its own healthy microbiome. It has its own bacteria, which to me is like it's a jaw-dropping thing to think about, healthy bacteria living inside our brain. Number one, how does it get there? How do they get there? Number two, what are they doing in there, right? And we do know that bacteria and nerves communicate, like through the vagus nerve. And geez, do we think that the bacteria in our gut hitched a ride up the vagus nerve and like taking an Uber and get dropped off in our brain? Maybe so.
I love this analogy. Just imagine it.
It's a remarkable area of research, and I think it causes those of us who medical researchers like me get really excited by these discoveries, because it means there's so much more for us to learn that can provide hope to people for good health span, for example, or overcoming disease. I also think that it forces us to assume a kind of humility in the medical community, that even though we thought we knew a lot and where we have some tools that we can actually use, how little we actually know about how to heal. And this is why we need to respect Mother Nature, why we need to listen to our bodies, because your doctor can't x-ray everything, blood test everything. This is why biohacking is a useful tool to monitor things. I mean, doctors biohack all the time. We take all kinds of tests, but we can't we can't measure what we don't appreciate yet. And so I think this is why I always tell people the first thing you need to do is to think about, reconnect with how your body feels. Listen to your body, because it will be sending signals to you, communicating with you in ways that a doctor's tests may not actually reveal. Has its own healthy microbiome. Well, that actually unlocks kind of a box that allows us to peer in to say, well, what else could we be doing to make healthier brains, maybe with healthier bacteria? And the clues are starting to emerge. Again, we're at the beginning of a new era of discovering how to achieve brain health. We used to think, well, as you get older, the brain's going to decline. Not necessarily. That if you damage the brain, or the brain gets damaged, whether by trauma or by a stroke or even by cancer, it's not going to regenerate. Wrong. It will actually regenerate. And that, pretty much, if you lose certain functions, like whether it's smell or whether it's even vision, that you've lost, once it's gone, it's gone. Not necessarily true. And so a lot of these, previously long held tenets about brain health are now, just starting to be reconsidered when we looked at bacteria, healthy bacteria. So we do know that certain bacteria can actually influence the brain. We'll talk about two of them. First is Lactobacillus plantarum. So lactobacillus is a whole class of bacteria that are really, really important for health. There's hundreds of them, different types of lactobacillus, bacilli, and Lactobacillus plantarum is one of them. Now, each type of genus and species, each flavor of bacteria has lots of subflavors. It's kind of like, I don't know, you look at, get coffee, look at all the different types of coffee. You can have a pour over, you can have an espresso, and bacteria the same way. So one of the interesting things is Lactobacillus plantarum has been shown, when delivered as a probiotic, to smooth out and slow down the progression of Parkinson's disease. These are early clinical studies, but the fact that a single bacteria could actually have some measurable, discernible clinical effect when in people whose Parkinson's were not able to be well controlled. Now, this is early Parkinson's, and they're looking at progression. So you can slow down that inevitable decline with bacteria. I had a really, really good friend of mine who passed away from ALS, and which is Lou Gehrig's disease. That's a horrible neurodegenerative condition. We were lifelong friends, and I just watched him decline. In his last years, I was looking for bacteria that could actually help improve the brain. And that's how I first started to look at Lactobacillus plantarum. Now, he passed away from his condition, but the work has continued to go on in Lactobacillus plantarum. So it's called PS128. More studies are going on that, but it just shows us just the power of the bacteria and the brain. The other thing that we know is that Alzheimer's and other types of dementia seem to be linked to bacteria that are harmful in our mouth. Gum disease, gingivitis, inflammation of the gums due to bad bacteria growing in there, dysbiosis in our gut, like irritable bowel. Think about irritable mouth syndrome, right? So except that we don't see it, we don't feel it the same way. You're not running to the bathroom all the time. You're just going about your way, but these unhealthy bacteria may be sending signals to upset the brain microbiome as well. So it kind of makes sense as we're discovering this and wondering, could it be that simple things that improve our mouth microbiome or a lower gut microbiome could actually reshape our trajectory of brain health? One of the bacteria that actually, lactobacillus, that actually helps the brain is Lactobacillus reuteri. That's reuteri, reuteri. This is an amazing bacteria. It used to be present frequently in the human gut, and over the last century, especially with the advent of antibiotics, it became less and less predictable. But we find it in foods. Lactobacillus reuteri is very important. Let's first talk about the body. So it turns out that this is a bacteria that in pregnant moms hitches a ride on blood cells around 8 months in pregnancy, and then circulates in your bloodstream. And like catching an Uber, it gets dropped off in the nipple, so that when the baby takes the first suckle, a month later, it squirts some lactobacillus down the baby's mouth into their gut. Pretty amazing that a mom's colon bacteria could make its way into the mom's blood, get dropped off into her nipple, and then be delivered to the baby. So this is a kind of mapping, kind of like the how does this even occur? And do bacteria have their own ways where they can actually find their way to different organs? We don't know that, but we do know that Lactobacillus reuteri actually does impact the brain. And it impacts the brain by causing our brains to release oxytocin. Oxytocin, being the social hormone, is a hormone that floods us when we see somebody at the airport that we haven't seen in a long time that you like, and you go up to the arrival gate and give them a big hug, you feel great. That's oxytocin. When you get a kiss, not just a peck on the cheek, but a deep French kiss, oxytocin. Have an orgasm, that's massive amounts of oxytocin coming out. And this is a bacteria that actually helps our brain dribble out oxytocin. And so again, the brain is not just a collection of neurons to solve math problems, but also helps us be that social organism that we talked about that's so important for healthy aging. Hey, if you like that video, then you're going to love this one. Check it out.